old for video games.
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you.
And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. This week, General Kenobi. This week, we are not discussing Episode 3, Revenge of the Gungans. We're discussing Andor, Episode 8, Narkina 5, a venture into a galaxy far, far away at a time in the infancy of the rebellion and the crackdown of the Empire. I look very much forward to discussing this episode. A lot happening here, including the first appearance, which I don't know if we're going to see too much more of, but Andy Serkis, one of my favorite character actors. Not to spoil too much of Jedi Master Psyllium Maas' background. And as always, I turn it over to Psyllium Maas for his insight.
Thank you, Jedi Master UrzaMaster, Jedi Master Lord Uther, and all Andorian fans, near or far. We appreciate your support here on Pending Rebrand, and we hope you're enjoying the ride as much as we are taking it with you. We are venturing to Narkina 5, Episode 8 of Andor, which first aired on October 26, 2022. And unlike last week, where we had a long and convoluted backstory as to why there was a single director and a single writer, and the single writer got replaced because he was writing James Bond, and instead they wanted more searing drama. Throw that all aside. We're back in the groove. We have a 3-episode arc beginning tonight where we have one director and we have one writer. And in fact, we've seen this director before. This is Toby Haynes, and he did the first Ferrix arc for us. So he did episodes 1, 2, and 3, and now he's back for episodes 8, 9, and 10. So welcome back, Toby. But we do have a new writer, and his name is Beau Willimon. He is a playwright and a screenwriter. His stage play, Farragut North, which I did see in Los Angeles with Chris Pine, and Sex and the City's Mr. Big, Chris Noth, were the co-leads on stage. Farragut North was turned into the motion picture The Ides of March, which George Clooney and Ryan Gosling attached themselves to. It was a 2011 political drama. And Mr. Willimon, being it was his stage play, he had the original screenplay for that George Clooney and his producing partner tweaked. Then he went on from the success of The Ides of March, and he became the writer, creator, and showrunner for Netflix's House of Cards, and worked with David Fincher, Kevin Spacey, Robin Wright, and a whole host of others, Corey Stoll, Rachel Brosnahan, the works, for a searing political thriller set in Washington, D.C. Now, we all know how that story ended up. Mr. Spacey got himself into some hot water. The show lasted 6 seasons for Netflix. Mr. Willimon was the lead writer and showrunner for seasons 1 through 4 before he departed right before the proverbial poop hit the fan. He then went on to develop a television show for Hulu. It only lasted 1 season, but it landed Sean Penn as your lead. And Sean Penn, a volatile actor, outspoken activist, and not a man who does TV, to be honest with you. So it was kind of a coup to land him. The show was called The First, and it was about the planned expedition to Mars, the first astronauts who are slated to go to the Red Planet. It had the misfortune of coming out on or after Ridley Scott's The Martian with Matt Damon. which was very well received by audiences and critics.
Great film.
And so as a result, some of the luster kind of leapt out of the concept, if you will. It is worth checking out. Not all shows go on to have long and prosperous afterlives, but that doesn't mean that in their few short bursts, you might not find entertainment, drama, a sense of wonder. So it's definitely worth, if you've got the old Hulu and you're looking for something new, it might be worth a try. So, and then following that, Mr. Williman has been working with the Gilroys, Tony and Dan and John, and brought him on here. So I was very excited when I first saw these episodes, knowing that you had a top-notch playwright, screenwriter, who, again, did not have a Star Wars background, coming in and trying to give voice to these characters in these situations. And I think we can all agree, it feels like we're watching, once again, a different show, and yet it also feels like we're watching the exact same show, because now we've had the downtrodden population of Ferrex in the arc. We've had the tense heist on Aldhani and that arc, and now we are going behind bars, metaphorically and literally. We're in prison. And how many exciting classic film and literature and stuff have taken us, to be in prison, where you have sadistic guards and you have people that you lean on for support and so forth. And how do you take those classic tropes and expand them and give them new life and new meaning? And I'm happy to report that the Star Wars universe has found a way. For one thing, these guards are not quite as sadistic. They're more bureaucratic because the system is gamed in their favor. The prisoners are all John McClane's. Nobody's got shoes on. The floors are electrified. So if you get out of line, then you get fried. And that's how they keep you from running around at night and causing trouble. The settings go from 1 to 3. 1 looks pretty awful, so I can't imagine what it is when you dial it up to the max. And so they've figured out a way to sort of do crowd control here in sort of, again, a new and a interesting visual, sort of a mostly sterile white prison. And I mean, the first thing that occurs to me, the first major thought I had on this episode, I thought of the military prison industrial complex. And there's a couple different angles that I think the show addresses directly, and things that possibly might make you ponder a little. For one, we have a great sort of, cross-cutting between Mon Mothma and her upper crust relations in the Senate versus what's actually happening on one of these Imperial prison garrisons. And there's a scene in the middle of the episode. Mon Mothma is still trying to project the image of being sort of a pushover senator who no one really pays attention to, an irritation, as she put it, in the last episode, while secretly trying to raise funds and help the fledgling Rebel Alliance do more than just spout manifestos and slogans. And so while she's negotiating with her countryman Tay and trying to get her funds unfrozen and moved around, she gets pulled aside for others doing presumably, the Senate's galactic business. And we hear in this conversation this lighthearted cocktail banter, things you say over hors d'oeuvres or fine drinks. Have you seen Palpatine's new public safety decree? And, do you feel safe? Well, I do here, except from this drink. And it's the kind of rich uppercut snobbery, exactly, that, that crowd would be focused on. And when you hear Palpatine, whom we have seen in other Star Wars incarnations as Sith evil incarnate, he sounds just like a gentleman politician. He sounds very reasonable as they describe him, because that's how you would expect imperial leaning sympathizers to. And I'm sure it takes all for Mon Mothma not to like scream out, "He's a monster. Don't you get it? He's evil. Evil.
Evil.
Evil." So you contrast that by then what's happening actually in prison. And this was one of the main thoughts that I had was, isn't it interesting how when you look at class and you look at status and you look at, where everyone falls in society, in the prison, thanks to Palpatine, thanks to the Aldhani heist and the ISB cracking down with a whip, everyone's sentence in this particular Narkina 5 hub, and you can imagine this happened galaxy-wide, everyone's sentence was automatically doubled. So say you were in for the imperial equivalent of jaywalking, and you had 349 shifts or days left in your sentence, right away, your sentence was instantly doubled. You didn't do a darn thing. You might have been a productive and contributing member of the this sort of forced labor. You might have been hitting all your quotas and making your marks and being a good little prisoner. And again, the actual inhumaneness of the bureaucracy just cracks down its angry knuckles on you. And that got me to thinking about the makeup of the prison itself, because we know that Andor basically committed no crimes, was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and got a 6-year sentence for nothing. So when he tells his fellow prisoners, inmates, "I didn't do it," most times when you're in prison and someone, you ask them, "What are you in for?" "Oh, I didn't do it." You kind of go, "Yeah, that's right. Sure you didn't." But we know that to be true. So I'm thinking about this, and you guys chime in here on this particular thought. We know that Empire equals bad, and we know that they are overreacting to the Aldhani heist and the rising rebel activity. But surely in this prison, there are people that actually deserve to be there. Surely there are murderers and rapists and, hardcore thieves. Like, there are people that deserve to be punished and rehabilitated or what have you, removed from the general population. But the thing is, like, all of them, at least in this opening chapter, they look sympathetic, right? They don't look like hardened criminals. These guys don't look like the cast of Alien 3 when Sigourney Weaver's Ripley falls from the sky. Like, they seem like genuinely good people. So I guess my question is, whose side are we on here, in the sense, like, are all of these prisoners like Andor that are basically just, victims of the system? Or do some of these people actually, sort of deserve what the punishment that they're getting? And how does that make us feel, again, with the Emperor and the Empire doing all this? I know the show doesn't directly ask the question, but I was fascinated by the dynamics of it. How, again, you can be rich and it all just seems very ethereal and abstract. And then you get down to the nitty gritty and you see how people are suffering or punished. And it's intense. So I let's open up the floor there to our fellow Jedi Council members, and what impressed you or so forth about these ideas, these concepts.
Again, I think this is where the show shows off that there are so many stories you can tell that don't involve Jedi. But it does kind of beg the question, like, how did the Republic do things? Because, like you said, there are definitely, like, real criminals out there. Like, there are people who need to be on a prison colony or a work colony. That's a thing. And the Empire surely does away with those people, just like they do away with the workforce and, that they're just getting because they need people to do these menial jobs and they don't want to pay people to do it. That's how just prison works. That's how prison works in real life. But, it does kind of beg the question that, Mon Mothma being the legislator and these rich types, which, I mean, this is how real politics goes too. They're so disconnected from everyday folks who are dealing with this crackdown. Now, they're aware They know it's draconian. Mothma knows that like a lot of people are going to suffer, but do they really know the real suffering? And how do you draw the line between the two? Like the real suffering and the people who probably deserve to suffer. It's not, the show is certainly not begging that question. The show is just showing you the contrast between heroes and the situations they're in, and they're both working in some light to the same goal or to the same end. And it's Andor's journey. So I mean, showing how he is sort of forcibly being made part of a unit instead of acting for self.
Right.
Which is beautiful, beautiful storytelling. Mon Mothma, by contrast, though, really is working by herself. She's trying to run a rebel faction in a manner that is just completely inconsistent and discongruent with our friend Luthen. And Luthen is trying to unite the rebels in this episode as well.
Yes.
And the thing is, they're so discordant, and the Empire is much the same, but what we're seeing is the tide turning in this episode is the Empire is really solidifying who they are and how they run. It's not just these private security firms. It's like, all right, just keep your system in line and, we'll take what we want and you guys keep whatever we don't need, kind of thing, which can be very lucrative. But now it's like, all right, if this nonsense is going to happen, the attack on Aldhani, we're going to subjugate literally everybody. And it doesn't matter if you were wrong place, wrong time, if you were almost done with your sentence, we're keeping you for as long as we want. You just have to deal with it because you're a subject. So, in some respects, it's the Empire breaking bad in a way. Like it's prior to the Aldhani attack, it does kind of beg the question, like, was the Empire really that bad? Or were they just a bureaucratic, authoritarian leadership? I mean, probably they always had this in them, but they really didn't need to exercise it because there was no open threat to their authority. And this kind of begs a bit of a historical perspective too, that there are a lot of authoritative dictatorships that happen and have happened throughout history where, by and large, most of that empire prosperous, peaceful. The fringes or the expansion areas or the insurgency, extremely volatile. And that's where literally the word draconian arises. There's a huge amount of historical precedent there. But the truth is, and always has been, that under any given leadership, be it empire, be it republic, be it something else entirely, Council of Jedi perhaps, there are people who suffer and people who prosper. And the constant struggle, which is being painted here, is between really classes of society. The lower echelons are all fighting for the scraps in the prison. The lead prisoner is still a prisoner, subject to all the same rules, with right. Maybe a little more flexibility. It's a fake authority he's granted, basically. Right. And in some ways, the upper echelons are the same thing. Mon Mothma is a prisoner to her Senate position, a prisoner to her caste. Right. And there's no, it's immutable. There's no transfer between these echelons. There's no working between, except your merchant class, who's trying to tie together both ends and unify a rebel alliance. So really, this is one big argument that the middle class is the backbone of society. Whew, Kobe.
Woo!
Well, I have an announcement for all of our subscribers and future subscribers and past subscribers. This is my last podcast because Jedi UrzaMaster, Master of Urza's Jedi, just said everything that I was going to say, especially the prisoner piece. So I give up. Thank you, everybody. May the Force be with you. I'm out.
This is my Force powers I was using.
Yeah.
Simpatico, my friend. Anyway, so yeah, to me, the whole going between the prison in Mon Mothma was to show that she's in her own prison, right? I mean, she's trying to navigate it just the way he's trying to navigate it. And here's the one thing that I love about Cassian is that, and I guess this is a credit to the actor, right? Every time he's in a situation, and I see this sometimes with people that I interact with or with students, he's always thinking. Like I could see him standing on that pad and he was thinking, 7 steps ahead. And you could see it in his eyes. And when he's talking to people, when he gets on the floor, he absorbs everything and he's thinking, which, might play a role in future episodes, but it's very evident. And I just love how Diego Luna has that look on his face. Like, he's very good at showing that the character should be thinking all the time. And the idea of the imprisonment and almost the caste system within the prison. It's almost like he's a capo in a sense, if you want to take it that far, in terms of I'm losing his name now too, the actor who plays the lead
Andy
guy.
Serkis, Kino Loy.
Yes, Serkis. Yeah. Yes, his character being like thinking he's in charge of that floor. They had a little bit of capo in that as well, but with that, I have nothing else to say because UrzaMaster said it all.
Because UrzaMaster guides us all. There were a lot of details that stood out and will stay with me long after the episode is over. I mean, using the sign language code to communicate with people in different parts of the prison and so forth, that they had to work all that out and be able to translate it and understand it. The idea that, it's a 12-hour shift, you're competing against everybody in the room who in turn is competing with other rooms on the floor. And like the losers, I mean, like it's a race, even though it's just repetitive, it looks like a NASCAR pit stop. And the really cruel part is you see them assembling these widgets and it's just repetition, new machine comes out, do the exact same tasks, complete it, lift it off, put it on a cart, wheel it away, do another one. Like, we don't even know if this is just busy work, if it's just the imperial equivalent of dig that hole, now fill in that hole, now go dig another. Like, we don't know if they're even going to use this stuff. Like, I'm sure there might be some practical thing that they do, but they just kind of look like, widgets. And you think about how many of these things are being churned out, 7 tables in a room, and there's 7 rooms and there's 7 floors. I mean, it kind of boggles there. But the winner gets flavor with their food. Like, that's something it's like, you suck on a tube, and if you happen to have a really good shift, then, it goes from tasteless meal paste to whatever they call flavor, which I'm sure it doesn't come with a lot of variety and
Salt.
Tastes like chicken.
Tastes like chicken.
Which just made me think of something just real quick.
Go ahead.
The idea of punishing one, but it affects all. So I've seen that in education, right? Like, or with athletics. Hey, if this guy doesn't run fast enough, and I used to do it, I admit that I used to do it, and then you're going to find out why I changed. If this guy doesn't run fast enough, you're all going to run, right? We're all responsible for each other, but that can be taken too far. And, the Empire thinking by us punishing everyone like this now, what does it really do? Especially all those guys in prison, doubling their sentence. You're building. Little did the Empire know, but they were helping to build the resistance by punishing all.
It turned everybody into private pile.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's what they wound up doing. So, and do you have to have consequences? And I guess I'm talking in general right now, though I am thinking a little bit more about teaching and coaching. Yes, you have to have consequences, right? You've got to have that eventually. That's only right. But you better be careful who you deal it out to and how you deal it out. I mean, because there are repercussions for that, whether it's in this situation or anywhere else.
Right. I mean, if it's all, again, the classic analogy of the carrot and the stick. I mean, if it's all stick, then you're going to create one sort of response. And if it's all carrot, then you've lost control if you're trying to control the situation, et cetera, et cetera. So, I
And
mean,
it's a
right
very
now,
fine line.
yeah,
Like we've
the
talked about.
Empire is all stick, no carrot. And you see that with Dedra, because here is the first time since we've seen this sort of really put together woman in a man society trying to, hold her own against the sharks swimming around her. The claws come out in this episode, and the mask slips a little, and we start to realize that Dedra is just as dangerous and just as evil as anyone that we've probably met in the Empire. I mean, at first we sort of admired or even grudgingly respected her for being able to have agency in her voice, but you see it in how she's basically trying to get information from Cyril, and that's an unholy alliance right there. And then in the end, I still get chills, and I've seen it a few times now, where she deliberately leaves a tortured prisoner in the room, and they get their hands on Bix in Ferrex, and they bring her into the room, and then she behaves like, well, what is he doing in here? Get him out of here right now. Like, she makes it seem like I overlooked that, or, how dare you leave this man who's been, electrocuted and drugged and beaten within an inch of his life, for her to see, wink, wink. Like, and then she just goes right on, hello, Bix, we have a lot to talk about. Have a seat. So I thought this was a really sort of the unmasking of Dedra now. And if we liked her before, or even grudgingly respected her before, now I think fear is part of that recipe. And you see her commitment to the Imperial cause and her mission. And then it contrasts with Cyril, who is all about, I'm going to clear my name. And I says, he sounds like a zealot as he speaks to her by contrast. And, she even sort of mocks him. So this is all just about public safety, and so it's a fascinating dynamic, because technically they're both on the same team, right? They're both trying to get their hands on Andor. And it's great that we revealed that they're onto Luthen, but they don't have enough, they have a code name and they have rumors but they don't know who they're looking for. They know who they're looking for with Cassian Andor, and the brilliance of the Imperial bureaucracy war machine, that they're so arrogant, they don't like confirm your identification. Like, he's in that prison under an alias, and they don't care. They just wanted a live body for the factory floor. So they didn't go through the trouble of like background checking him, we'll scan him, see if he's got priors, or, I mean, they're just like, oh, you're breathing? Okay. Narkina 5, room 7, day shift. And so the cruelest irony is the man that everybody they're looking for, and they're like, he's the key. If we find him, then we find Axis, aka Luthen, and we have our first, crack against the Rebel Alliance. They've already got him. He's in prison for 6 years, and they have no idea. Like, and that's what I'm saying, is that the Empire is either arrogant or bloated or both, that they're never going to sit there and check each of these prisoners and say, like, wait a minute, this guy was wanted for smuggling on, Tatooine. He worked with the Hutts, or et cetera, et cetera. So it is fascinating that like, he's basically hiding in plain sight, even though he's in a real pickle as far as his outcome and predicament there. And then Val and Cinta. And this got me to thinking, if Cassian had not fled after the Eldani heist, if he had not just taken his cut, taken that ship, purchased it, and wanted to be left alone, would Luthen and Clea and Val and all of them, would they be trying to kill him? Like, wouldn't he have been better off just, again, joining the cause and staying, close? I don't think they would have executed him following the success of the Aldhani case. So I think he put himself and Marva and everybody on Ferrex in danger by doing this, because now we've got stakeouts on the planet. We've got Clea talking Luthen into cutting off all communications. And I don't think she's wrong, but I think she's got a ruthless streak in her. And I think Luthen has some of the same tendencies, but there's still a little glimpse of humanity in him, and he kind of wrestles with that. And that's why I want to turn it back over to my fellow Jedi Council members, because one of the premier scenes in this, in terms of dialogue, you want to talk about actors at the peak of their craft, just volleying it like a tennis ball back and forth, and doing so by not saying what they're really saying. I mean, a master class, if you will, between Stellan Skarsgård as Luthen and our first glimpse of Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera. I mean, what a sequence where they both try to deflect like credit for Aldhani, even though Luthen, I mean, and you know, was that you? No, I'm sure it was you. Well, that's what you would say if you said it was you. No, now I know it's you. I mean, that was just absolute brilliance. And then keep this in mind, viewers of Andor, not to be a spoiler, but Luthen approached Saw with a plan to attack an Imperial substation, power station, and threw a bunch of names out there that kind of went by quickly and so forth. But the idea was, as Lord Uther and UrzaMaster said at the beginning, let's bring the rebels, let's start pulling together, right? We're all fighting the Empire. We all should be on the same team. And Saw's like visceral hatred of other cells, other factions, because they are separatists, right? They were attacking the Republic or breaking away from the Republic in episode 2. And he won't work with them. And he won't work with these other religious zealot. Like, it's fascinating. Like, how are you going to herd all of these cats? I mean, and Luthen is just but one individual, obviously. Like, how are you supposed to get people who ideologically are all across the spectrum? I mean, if there's one thing the Empire breeds out, it's freedom of thought and so forth. You toe the company line. Here's the manual, memorize it, and then live it. But the rebellion, the things that we love about them, their independence, their sense of freedom and justice and all of that, is exactly the thing that's going to keep them scattered and inefficient and weak against this Imperial war machine. So you guys talk about sort of two superior actors, and this idea that the Rebel Alliance just right now is not very alliancey.
It's incredible because there's a couple of things, and this just dawned on me, and it's an amazing parallel that I'm going to draw here. But first, Stellan Skarsgård, Forrest Whitaker, unbelievable. I mean, two incredible actors in the same room. It's as though you put, I don't know, William Shatner and Ricardo Montalban in the same room.
Nice.
Just brilliance. As a matter of fact, those two are so good, they don't even need to be in the same room to craft one of the greatest films of all time, Star Trek II Wrath of Khan. Check it out on our sister podcast, Warp Core Podcast, here on Pending Rebrand. If you hit subscribe, stay up to date with all of our podcasts and content. But get this, Stellan Skarsgård is attempting to do what, let's look at human history, because all these stories are basically retelling things that have happened in a new and exciting way in a galaxy far, far away. He's trying to do what many, many people have tried to do in the ancient world, Mesopotamia, Persia, etc., in the ancient Fertile Crescent region of the world. For centuries and centuries and centuries, there were all of these disparate, horse peoples, steppe peoples, peoples of the desert, hunter-gatherer types, herders. Even those with civilizations in those areas were small kingdoms, disunited, and had to be conquered to be united in some way, shape, or form. But by and large, always kind of returned to this scattered, ununified, visage of humanity, shall we say. We have that with the Rebel Alliance. We have all of these different, very similar, but very different. Some of them have different religions. Some of them have different species. But they're all kind of cut of the same cloth. They're all of the same jib. They just need something to bring them together. And one thing that I think is very interesting in 4, 5, and 6, as we're thinking about Andor leading into what the Rebel Alliance becomes in A New Hope after Rogue One, you have this unifying force that penetrates them, binds them, and it arises from this ancient religion. And what has done that in history? Think of the Middle East peoples. What united them and created an unprecedented empire? Islam, a religion. Somebody came through with a religious method of tying together all of these ropes and created something that was so incredibly strong, it rivaled the scope of the Roman Empire, the scope of Alexander the Great. And only until very recent modern history did that, come to fall apart because of modernization, et cetera, which I think is another story you could tell in the Star Wars universe, which kind of interesting. Post-Jedi Star Wars would be rad, very rad. I am titillated by the thought of it. Hook me up with that paycheck, Mr. Filoni. Felonious monk, if you will. But that ultimately is what binds these rebels together in the end. So we know at some point they adopt the "May the Force be with you." The Jedi become involved. Now, whether or not they show up in Andor, kind of irrelevant. But it is one way to tie them together. It's like, hey, remember how good it was when we had the Jedi at our back? We didn't have to fight all these battles. They kind of kept it at the upper echelon. The Jedi, or the rich people's secret police. I mean, let's be honest. It made life easier because the Jedi were like, hey, the masses need peace. Well, think of Coruscant when the Jedi Council was there and in full force. Think of what we saw going on in Episode 2. There was plenty of dark underbelly of Coruscant, and the Jedi Temple was right there. I mean, the little people, they always fall no matter who the leader is. So you have to sort of sell a lie. What better way to sell it? I mean, so I'm picking up what they're laying down. We see these Kyber crystals come into play in Rogue One, directly tied to Jedi, directly tied to the Empire. The Force is the force that penetrates and binds all living creatures. And we're just seeing part of that roll. That was a weird way to say that. Part of that roll, rattle, drum, and hum of that ever rolling wheel that our good friend in Ahsoka is fighting against, Baylan Skoll, which makes me even more excited for future Ahsoka episodes, because not knowing Andor prior to seeing Ahsoka, I'm seeing how they're starting to tie these things together despite the differences in directors and writers.
So to your point, we're seeing the Force without a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you're feeling about that one. I could see that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like the idea, as always, of the enemy is my friend, right? And that's what you're seeing with all these separatist groups. That's going to be their rallying cry. Which, again, to your point, UrzaMaster, which is why I need to retire from the show, because you're making all my points for me, is that uniting against that is such an important thing. So, and again, that's all I got, because he said it all.
Maybe Uther goes first next time.
No, you're doing great.
So let's talk baked beans. Okay, Lord Uther, what about the Jedi's eating the baked beans? Would Ditka support it? Hey, Cut the Cheese, Poke the Bear is a different podcast.
Totally for it, everybody, and the Bears might get a victory there. Maybe. Probably not.
All right. Well, we've delved into the meta consciousness of this show and all of its layers of onions. But on a more practical, just plot point, how the heck is he going to get out of this prison? Like, what I love is that on the first glance, there doesn't appear to be holes. There doesn't appear to be like, they just happened to leave that, turnstile unguarded at midnight. So as a viewer, I'm like, okay, he's in a box. How's he going to get out of that? What's going to happen to Bix? I mean, she's looking after Marva and B2EMO, even though she has no real cause to. I mean, Andor's given her nothing but grief her whole life, it seems like, but she's still there. And then, again, wrong place, wrong time, snatched up, now in the clutches of Dedra. Like, what's going to happen to her? What Val and Cinta. I mean, here is a adult, complex, mature relationship. Val has already proven to have varying shades of cowardice and courage. And Cinta is much obviously more the practical one. And she says, look, I told you the struggle comes first and we get what's left. So that's an interesting, I love that they suggest a history and a relationship between the two without having to spend, again, a whole lot of time dramatizing it. They do it with an economy of words, gestures, suggestions.
Holding hands.
Holding hands. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's as hot and heavy as it gets. And yet it says so much about where they kind of are. And it regardless of where you are in your current relationship or marital status, like you transpose yourself briefly. What if me and my significant other were behind enemy lines, or what if we were on the front lines and so forth? Would we be equally as strong and committed to the cause, or would we want to take the Cassian route and get a bunch of credits and go hide, which didn't work out so well for him, et cetera, et cetera. So like I say, it feels like a different show because we're constantly resetting the stakes, the locations. The classic storytelling now is going to be break out of the prison somehow, and yet it's all a part of a whole. And we thought we had lost sight of those characters on Ferrix because we were off on Aldhani or Coruscant or so forth, but they're still with us and they're still part of this larger narrative thread, and we've got Luthen and Mon Mothma and Cyril, and so really to first time viewers or even people that know what's coming, it's just how do all of these disparate storylines come together, because we know where it ends, right? We know that it ends on Scarif with the Death Star and the plans and the sacrifice of Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor and so forth. But he's not that person yet, right? And this is a far more interesting Cassian. Once we're done analyzing Andor and so forth, once it's finally run its course through its 2 seasons, I think it would be refreshing to go back and see Rogue One with all of that history imprinted, not necessarily conveyed, because again, when they crafted this, they kind of kept him at a singular level, a surfacey plateau, like I'm the rebel intelligence officer who's here to get you from point A to point B, et cetera, et cetera. But now that we're learning all about him and who he is, it'd be fascinating to see what echoes or anything we could splice into to Rogue One and so forth to make his sacrifice mean even more than it did just by watching the film. So hats off
I
to
felt like
Mr. Williman. And
like in Rogue One, that Andor was more of the Hans. I felt like he was and it's funny because I think with those movies, I'm always comparing them to the original cast. Like, oh, who's the Han Solo of this? Who's the Luke Skywalker, right? And so I always felt that Andor was more of that Han Solo-y type character, but this takes it obviously to a totally different, completely different level. But you also might be able to be like, I mean, we saw what went on with Han Solo. This is one reason why I'd like to know a little bit more about his backstory, because to me, I think Han, I would like to see the greedy out for himself, in a sense, Han Solo, that we were, that basically they tell us that's what he was, right? And I feel like with Andor, we're getting the backstory. That's why I want another Solo movie, because I want to see that Han Solo. I want to see that.
I want to see another Luke Skywalker movie with Sebastian Stan.
Oh, yes.
I want to see the Jedi Council being set up. I want to see his academy. I want to see how Kylo Ren comes to power. I want to see all of these things unfold a bit. And I think the interesting thing you could do, with those stories, because again, you don't have to tell a Jedi story to be successful. We've seen that, thus far in Andor, but there's still a lot of other Jedi stories to tell. I mean, the I think there's some sort of canonical confirmation of like there was 11 Jedi after Order 66 or some nonsense number like that. But that's like the trained and established Jedi, and the Skywalker family. There are plenty of other Force sensitives out there, again, beyond the Outer Rim, this alternate galaxy where Thrawn, has run from. There's just so much to uncork here. But, on a surface level, like we started this, it is just exciting. Like, this is a vehicle episode. It sets people up in these situations like, geez, what's going to happen next? It's the glass shattering that John McClane now has to walk over. It's the airplane getting diverted off course, and there's no flights back to where you need to get. So you got to take a bus and a train and, a milk truck to get to wherever you're going. Like, these are the exciting moments that, I know in some respects we don't get a lot of closure right away. So when we're reviewing these 1 week or one episode at a time, it speaks to an older era of television and film where you didn't have the instant gratification we get now with like, oh, I'll just wait until the whole season is out and then binge watch it in an afternoon, which, hey, it's fun. I like it too. But there's something to be said about how, especially for me, first time viewer, long time listener, it's exciting because it's like, I really don't know what's going to happen next. I don't watch ahead. Like, I watch these as we do these shows. I watch them and I'm like, wow, that was fantastic. Or I don't know about this one. It's the cool thing about Star Wars is like the stories that they're telling now, if they were to go in a direction where they're delivering more year-long content, let's say, because we get, a show or two or three a year, maybe a movie if we're lucky, maybe two movies of differing types within the Star Wars canon. If they want to go the Marvel route and start to maybe dilute themselves a little bit, although I think some of the Marvel gets a little extra hate because there's so much of it. And, when you set a bar really high, it's hard to hit that bar. You can't go into everything expecting, I don't go into everything expecting it to be Return of the Jedi. Not everything's going to be as great as an Ewok. Sometimes you're going to get a few Gungans. But I have to admit, like, I would love to see them take these extra Jedi Star Wars stories and give like a traditional TV setup of, could even be a half-hour show of just life in the Empire or life beyond the Empire or life in the Republic or the Old Republic or life pre-Jedi. They're doing that whole Jedi origin story 10,000 years before A New Hope or whatever the case. I forget the timeline exactly. Why not? Just show us a galaxy far, far away. How did they get to have this interstellar technology? Was there one planet? Was it Coruscant that, just sort of started it all? I'd love to know the history. And I know there's books and there's all this and that and the other out there. But this is really we talk about the future of Star Wars a lot. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about, is like, this opens up a whole universe of questions. We've had other universes like this that are pretty well explored by now. I mean, the MCU has done it so many times. They have multiple universes that they have to tie together somehow, which also still makes for compelling content in some respects. It gets a little tired. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't tell new stories and you can't take old stories and reimagine them or reinvent them or tell them in a new way that just feels good. And really this Andor story, I mean, it's very similar to a, first third of Shawshank. I mean, it feels very similar, and you get some of the elements of, Andy's character in this whole episode of like, I was almost done with my sentence and they added more time. Yeah. They denied my parole. They made me a bookkeeper when I found a guy who could confess and change my whole thing.
Everyone here is innocent.
Exactly. Everyone here is innocent. I was just going to bring that up. Like that, they're pulling on a lot of great referential antecedents, which is kind of redundant. Please don't criticize my diction, you other English nerds out there who I know subscribe to Pending Rebrand, by clicking that subscribe button, hitting that notification button, so anytime an episode drops or new short and or Cinebit drops, you can check it out immediately. And coming soon, pendingrebrand.com.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Catchphrase.
Let's rate this episode.
So, I'm going to kick it off this week because I don't often kick these off. If y'all don't mind, if you'll forgive.
No. By all means.
This episode was really good, although it was a vehicle. So I don't know that I can give it a green lightsaber. I also don't think it is quite a blue lightsaber because it's a little bit better than adequate, better than just a vehicle. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up at least a couple of times in this podcast Samuel L. Jackson's purple lightsaber.
Oh, nice.
So powder-coated purple Yeti knockoff brand water thing, whatever you want to call it. I give it a purple lightsaber. What prevents it from being green for me, not just that it's a vehicle episode setting dominoes up for what I anticipate to be the next two episodes of high-paced action of probably varying amounts. But it leaves me wanting more too often. I want more Stellan Skarsgård and Forrest Whitaker. I definitely want more Dedra. That was intense, that scene, for a number of reasons. But I'd be remiss to say I don't want more Dedra. I want more of our enlightened romance and how those two are dealing with that behind enemy lines. I want to explore that story. I want to know more about them. And I am fairly convinced I'm not going to get it through the rest of the series. So I'm almost a little sad by that because like I realize where the show is kind of heading. I'm like, darn it. Like there's so much here. And this is the episode that just sort of reminds me of that. I also have a feeling that we're probably going to lose a couple of these characters coming up. And I'm like, also crap. Like, I want to understand more of Cassian's relationship with his pseudo mother. I want to see that have some sort of conclusion where they're not apart when it concludes. Like, and I have a feeling that's not going to happen. Now, I'm not saying I might not come back and revise this if things change and I get what I want. As we've seen in other shows, sometimes it's a two-parter episode, and you just got to wait for the back 40.
Nice.
Well, I'll go next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Purple.
No.
Pass.
Everything you said is exactly why I love this episode, because I know what's going to happen. So I will say biasly, that's what's playing into my my rating tonight. So everything you don't know, I do, which makes me go, I would like to go Larry Bird green, but I'm going to take something from the 80s that matches up with that anyway, in a sense. Well, at least is an 80s thing, and go floppy disk.
Floppy disk
Green.
Yeah.
With, by the way, some little movies I was trying to write too. Oh, it's tough to see. Star Trek, Guardian Angels, and Tradition were a couple of script writing things I was taking a swing at there. Yeah.
Shout out to 3M. That's a 144 right there.
Yes, Gary. I mean,
oh my goodness. Yep. That's very hard to top. Well,
you bet it is.
I'm of a green nature too. Like I say, I've been fairly consistent. This week, to illustrate, we have a mild jalapeno, Tabasco green. This was a 2021 vintage, still good. It's great. It's great on enchiladas. Perhaps some chicken. Whatever you want to sort of dress things up, seafood, some shrimp. So yeah, it might even give yourself a little dairy kick here. So sometimes people find Tabasco a little harsh, a little biting, a little vinegary. This one, despite the jalapeno advertising, it is a nice, mild flavor that gives it a pleasant kick. Much like this show, for a show that puts itself, unlike, let's say, Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, which is a series of episodes loosely thematically tied, sometimes with an undercurring season-long arc, but for the most part, individual episodes here. This show is almost trying to one-up it, although in not direct competition, by reinventing itself every 3 episodes. And that's, I'm not going to say it's harder than what Strange New Worlds is doing with the strength of their writing team and their episodes, but they are trying to do something even more daring, which is to try to give you a whole new experience within a season and still make it feel consistent across the board. Like, you don't say to yourself, wow, the quality of Narkina 5 is so much better than the Aldhani episodes. I mean, that's what I'm saying. The quality is straight across the board. But they are definitely, I think those 2 shows right now show you what is possible. And you can enjoy our commentary on Strange New World, both the prior seasons and the soon-to-be filmed and released 3rd season, over on the Warp Core podcast, which is part of Pending Rebrand, where we sit and currently are going through our season 1 of the original series of Star Trek archives. So all those classic Trek episodes that maybe the olds like to talk about on Thanksgiving, like, now see for yourself just what you've been missing with digitally remastered episodes on your favorite streaming service. So, yes.
Or bust out the VCR.
There you go. There you
Get
go.
yourself some VHS vintage Star Trek. Yeah, no, absolutely. Andor is reaching to new heights in a galaxy far, far away, where the future of Star Wars is bright. Say what you will, South Park, about Disney's leadership, maybe on occasion from another dimension, but always potent, effective, not unlike the Jedi.
The Grange.
May the Force be with you.
And also with you.